Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be helping you decide, should you buy The Isle or Path of Titans? Now, both of these games have been basically competing, not really, but they are in the dinosaur survival game market. So yes, in this video I'm going to be covering both games, going through details about how they play and other things, and I'll get to a very, very strange conclusion at the end. Also, if you're new here, make sure to like, share, subscribe. It helps me out an absolute ton. And maybe if you want, leave a comment down below. So, anyway, yes, to begin with, I'll talk about both games and how they are played. Let's start with The Isle. The Isle is a hardcore survival game, and it's probably the closest you can get to a full realism dinosaur game. So, like, as realistic as possible. Where eating specific parts of the body of something that you've killed is healthier, and also I think specific animals are healthier to eat as well. And every hit in every single fight could be your last, or it could be the one that gets you a kill. They all matter. You can't just miss here and there. It's not that easy. The Isle has two versions, Legacy and Overma. In the Isle Legacy, you can play Survival or Sandbox. Sandbox is like there's no growth, you just kind of run around as an adult. And you can play different dinosaurs because not every dinosaur in Sandbox is in Survival. So dinosaurs that are limited to Survival are stuff like Giganotosaurus and Triceratops, and then dinosaurs that are limited to Sandbox mode are Acrocanthosaurus and Ankylosaurus, just to name a few. There's loads more dinosaurs in the Isle. Legacy, of course, I'm talking about Legacy. But that's not the only version of the Isle. You also have Urvima, which is the most recent version, and you can play as different dinosaurs again, so different to Legacy and Sandbox, of like Legacy, Sandbox, and Survival. You can also play as Stegosaurus or Carnotaurus in Urvima. However, I would just like to say that Urvima is still in heavy development, so it's not finished yet, but it's being developed and it's looking pretty good so far. On to Path of Titans. However, before I continue, I will say that this game, like Overma, is not complete. Path of Titans is still in its game preview state. Uh, but I am much more familiar with Path of Titans, as those of you who watch my channel will know. Any newcomers, you probably can also see that. Anyway, Path of Titans is a dinosaur MMO survival game where you can spawn in as dinosaurs like Picnominosaurus and Eotriceratops. Path of Titans is less realistic than the latter game, that being the Isle, Overma and Legacy, with more of an MMO style where you create builds on dinosaurs, so like subspecies have special things, abilities. You can have like abilities, hides, bites, they all do different things. And you can even have voice buffs, which are roles that can add a buff or a debuff to you or your opponent. And it's very much like an MMO in that way, not much realism. However, there's loads of different ways you can play Path of Titans. You can either play it as a full deathmatch, so spawn in, go rampage, kill everything, no loss if you die, or you can play the complete opposite of full realism. So you get, some servers you only get one life, and if you die, that's it. You got to restart your entire dinosaur. Other servers are semi-realism, so they're not too harsh, but they're also you can't just kill everything. And then you've got no rules, which are like deathmatch, but deathmatch has rules, and no rules are just straight up all chaos. They're just they're just a few to mention. That's not all of them. And I believe that covers Path of Titans in a bit of a short but sweet way. Like I've played the game a lot, I know a lot about it. That basically sums up Path of Titans. Onto a more technical approach, the game's availability. First, we're going to start off with The Isle because this game has got some very intense but amazing looking graphics. Like, these graphics are incredible, as well as the physics. However, this can come at a big cost. The game itself is not only PC only, but you can only run it on certain graphic cards, and it's so intensive that you need like good specs as well just to run the game. I've got some of the required specs here, and I'm just going to read them off. So you'll need a game CPU speed, quad core, Intel or AMD processor, 2.5 gigahertz or faster, and then you'll need 6 gigabytes video card of RAM, and a NVIDIA GeForce GTX 760 or AMD Radeon R9 280X. I'm really bad with motherboards and cards and stuff like that, so I probably read all of that wrong. But that's what I could find of like the minimum of what you need to run the game. You also need dedicated video RAM of 2048 megabytes. And all of that is not cheap. I had a look, that is not cheap stuff, but I feel like it is worth it because the Isle is pretty much the most realistic, best looking dinosaur simulator type game. And if you really want to play a hardcore realism game, the Isle basically has everything that you want. Now, I'm going to compare it to Path of Titans with graphics, sorry, that are not as good as the Isle. You know, they still look pretty good. They can look quite realistic. You know, they still hold up to that standard, but compared to the Isle, they're nothing. Um, but Path of Titans has a pretty genius way of making up for that, and that is with it being incredibly available. So you can have Path of Titans on nearly any PC or laptop. You can have it on the Nintendo Switch, even before the Switch 2. You can have it on Xbox, you can have it on PlayStation, and you can even have it on mobile phones. You can play Path of Titans on mobile phones, which I think is plenty reasonable for the lack in the graphics. You know, it's got less graphics, but you can play it on any device basically. Now that I've gone through both games, how you can play them, and where you can get them and stuff, it's time to figure out which one is better. I'm using the term better as in what's better for the majority of people, so the general, the most people. And, there's a couple of ways we can look at that. One of the main ways is being what type of gameplay will the majority enjoy to play? The Isle as an insane hardcore realism game, or Path of Titans, which is a more laid back MMO dinosaur survival game. There's a big community who wants to play the dinosaur game as I'm a big dinosaur killing everything and winning fights and not much else. But then there's also a very large community of people who want to play like they want to grow, they want to sit in a bush, ambush, sit in the water and ambush, and wander the lands as giant herds of herbivores and stuff. They want to play full realism. However, the question I have is which one is most preferred by the majority? Now, I have looked into this a lot, and I've asked a lot of people which one they prefer, how they prefer to play both games, and unfortunately, with all of my own experience and stuff, I believe the latter is more popular in the dinosaur community, especially with new people getting into dinosaurs. It's more younger audiences and they don't have the patience to grow for hours and hours, which sucks because I really do. I like that stuff. That is pretty interesting to me, sitting in a bush and growing. I like doing that. However, the majority fits the gameplay of running in and just having fights, which I think, that makes it the most preferred. And, you know, with one of the games being way more accessible, I think it fits the category much more. And unfortunately, that's Path of Titans. You can play the game in nearly every single way you can imagine, and I think that gives it an edge over the Isle. And looking at it all statistically and all, Path of Titans for the majority of people is the better game to play. So, like, if you want to play a dinosaur game and you might want to play it realistically sometimes, but other than that, you just want to play as dinosaurs, Path of Titans, by far, you can get it. Or you should get it over the Isle, because the Isle, you need a lot of specific stuff on a PC to get it, and also it doesn't really have too many ways you can play it. However, I'm not saying that one game is better than the other in terms of quality and what makes a game a game. In my own honest opinion, both games are great and have a chance at being incredibly successful. This video is more of a suggestion for the average gamer interested in dinosaurs. It's still fine if you prefer the Isle or even just more hardcore realism version of a dinosaur game. I myself enjoy them a lot more. Like I said, I enjoy just sitting in a bush waiting or sitting in a lake waiting, hunting, and even growing to an extent. That's what I personally enjoy more. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video a lot. Again, this video is more of a guide, not a straight yes or no, since it will always be preference. It's always going to be someone's preference. That will be the determining factor. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Feel free to leave a comment below. Make sure to like and subscribe. It helps me out an absolute ton. And yeah, take care. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.